Welcome to Changing the Game, where bold leaders, rule breakers, and trailblazers drop the playbook and share how they lead, win, and shake things up.
All right, welcome back to the show. Today, I'm joined by Katie Virtue. Katie is a former Division I hockey player. She's a consultant, speaker, and a recovering perfectionist. Katie built her career the way many athletes do: work hard, say yes, climb the ladder fast. But after burnout and a major identity shift, she began asking better questions about performance, purpose, and sustainability. Now she's helping leaders apply athlete level thinking to business without sacrificing their health, energy, or sense of self. Welcome, Katie.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. Great to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. I can totally relate to the recovering perfectionist. I think sometimes it's still a perfectionist, but yeah, working on overcoming that too myself.
Yeah. Recovering's the key word in it.
Yeah, I'm sure you deal. I mean, obviously that comes from your personal experience. I'm sure you see that a lot in the work you do now with your consulting. So I'm excited to dive into your background and hear more about kind of where that perfectionist identity came from.
Mhm.
So I want to start off. You played Division I hockey at Niagara.
Yeah.
What was that chapter of your life like? Did that perfectionism show up in that chapter or even before that?
Yeah, and it's funny. I talk about how even from a young age, I remember my coaches saying, need to go out there and give 100%. Or, you need to go out there and give 110% for whatever reason they wanted to add that they would still like to add that 10% on. And I feel like that kind of stuck with me as, and whether that's coaches, parents, teachers, like that you're striving for that 100%, on the ice, in school. Um, and I think part of it too, often being the only girl on the boys' teams until I got to, a later stage, later age, it kind of felt like this: be the hardest worker and prove that you belong there. Thankfully, there's a lot more girls in the sport today, a lot more women, which is great to see. But wasn't always easy back then, trying to prove that you should be out there. So I think that mindset started there. And I think what evolved at the Division I level at Niagara was that actually there's a lot of components to performance, and athletes of all sports will see that when you're at that high level, right? There's you're watching your nutrition, and you're doing off ice workouts, and you're having hopefully a rest day and going through video work to analyze your game. So I think at that point it was okay. There's all these parts to performance, and when I got to that level, it was a shift, as I'm sure people go through, to realize, okay, you're not the best player right away, maybe. And so you go through all these teams, or maybe you're one of the top players, and then now you've got to shift and adjust. So it was good because I really had to learn about, okay, how do I be a good teammate, even in that situation, and grow. But it was probably also the time where I started to think about passions and ambitions beyond hockey, especially as it got to junior, senior year. And it was like, okay, that chapter of life is ending. But thankfully, was in a place where discovered things I wanted to think about and pursue in a career.
Yeah, that's such an interesting actually dynamic. Your experience was so different being like the only girl on the boys team, like having to prove yourself from a young age. And I'm sure that that mentality just grew with you and carried you through every stage. Like, hey, I have to prove myself. I have to be as close to perfect as possible to give that 110%. I totally can relate to some of those things. When you were transitioning then out of hockey, you said, you started to focus on other ambition. So did you feel that transition out of sport came a bit easier for you since you were so focused on that next chapter? Or what was that like?
I think what helped was that when I was in school, I started to, take courses I liked, and do projects or internships or things. I was like, oh, I really enjoy this stuff, so I'm excited to go do that. Thankfully, I went and did some coaching right away. Coaching hockey. I still played fairly competitively, played up in Canada. And then when I moved back to the States. And so, I didn't completely drop hockey. So I still got to have, competition, a team around me. But I then kind of, I think, shifted into, all right, now take all of these past goals. Now you're just kind of more doing it more for the enjoyment of the sport, but take that goal oriented mindset. And I say, this is where the identity shifted to being a corporate climber. It was, okay, you're done with school. Now you go and start here and you work hard and you ask about what's next and climb that ladder. And that then, became, the next transition. And, like I said, it kind of almost took like, that's what you were doing from a hockey perspective of, okay, what's next, what competition's next, what level's next. And now it was applying that in the workplace.
Yeah, yeah. So just carry those same like values with you essentially to the workplace, to the corporate world, the corporate climbing, as you said. So
Yeah.
walk me through that journey. You transitioned out, you're still playing, so you're keeping in touch with your sport, still kind of filling that bucket, but then your identity did start to shift as you got into your career. So walk us through, where you started and yeah, we'll start there. Where did you start your career journey? What was that like?
Yep. So I did some consulting work. It was something that I was really interested in getting into and had gotten some initial experience at school. And so wanted to go into consulting work, was in a small company, which was a nice starting point because I got to really get involved with a lot being at a small company. Um, and then the next shift was really interesting because I went to a slightly bigger company. And, that role had a lot more opportunity because the first one was so small. So this one had opportunity. They were supportive of leadership development. I got my, first chances to have team members and manage people. But it was definitely, it was male dominated at the top. So I started to kind of see what that was like then being a female and again starting to kind of tap back into okay, I've been here before with hockey and having to prove myself. But I it always felt like a lot of the goals I was setting were based on what role do I have, what objectives are set for me, what goals are or role is next that I want. Okay, and that's how I'm going to set goals and objectives and what to develop and skills. And I went through then where we were purchased by another company. And so the company became bigger, but the culture changed. And that's where I started to realize, okay, I'm in this environment where I'm asking for more, wanting to grow, be challenged, but it's not about your purpose, your development. It's about like, are you producing numbers and who, do you know well enough at the top? And so having experienced that, I realized for me, I was like, I need, something different. This is a time to go, explore and find another role. And then I wanted to get back into consulting. I had definitely missed that. And this was a point I had a decision of go to a consulting company and kind of be in a similar bucket and salary job, the security of it, or go to a consulting company that was very different. And it was contract work, but it was something where their culture was, what I was very interested in. There was both a male and a female owners of the company, and they were really, people oriented. And so while that was riskier, from a financial standpoint, I thought that's the route I'm going to go. And it really paid off in the type of leaders that I had there.
Yeah, when the culture started to change at your company and you were like, oh man, maybe I want to be a little bit more purpose driven, was it scary to take that leap to a new company? Or when you started thinking about your options, like, was there a little bit of like, ooh, this is like, I'm out of my comfort zone here? Or was it pretty natural for you?
No, it was scary. It was out of the comfort zone. It was going from being in an office full time, everybody's close to you, to a completely virtual team. And the leaders at this new company were in the UK, so it was different time zones. So yeah, it was completely out of my comfort zone. But um, I think that's when I maybe reverted back to some of that. Okay, but I can do this. That athlete mindset of, I'm gonna prove it. I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna show them what I can do. And put myself out there and be open to, let me try this, or I'm happy to help here on this project. And so I think that mindset helped, that resiliency, that it was a struggle in the first so many months, but the decision to go there, knowing it was making that decision based on the culture, that's what then ended up paying off. Because then those were the leaders who said, let's define your brand, let's think about who you are beyond this work situation, and help you dream bigger and set bigger goals. And no one had pushed me like that before, to say, okay, you have this one identity, but you can have multiple. What do you want it to look like? So yeah, that was great.
No, I think that's awesome. I think it's really awesome when people find themselves at a company where they do value growth beyond just your metrics in the role. Like, of course, those are important, but we're holistic, well-rounded people, or we want to be, at least. So I think
Yeah.
it's cool that you were able to find a culture that pushed you in that direction and said, what can we develop outside of the metrics, and how can we develop your brand? And how would you encourage someone listening who wants to find a place like that? How do they evaluate? Like, when you were going through interviews, how did you know that this was the place? Or how did you know that their values aligned with yours? Because I know so many candidates out there are looking for something that fills their cup
Mhm.
besides performance metrics. So yeah, what was your experience like in evaluating this new company?
So I think I had in my mind an idea of what I was looking for. Maybe I didn't have it like clearly defined, but I kind of knew, okay, this, and this culture, I really liked that in the past. And then that I experienced one that wasn't working so well. So what were some of those red flags and things to keep in mind? Um, there was a lot around the wording they were using, right? Like, what is their mission statement, their values? Did they ask those types of questions around culture in the interviews? I got to talk to a few different people as well, and people that would be peers as part of the interviewing process, to have discussions. So I think that was really helpful, to kind of not just who's the leader or who's hiring you, but um they were open to it. This has got to be a two-way fit. Like, yeah, talk to someone who would be in a similar role, to have those conversations and find out, like, what is it like, the ways of working. So I would say, if you can have a sense of and do some thinking around, again, what would be kind of pros and cons for you. And then if there's that ability to have conversations with people at the company, to get, that viewpoint.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Trusting your gut is huge, like knowing what didn't work for you in the past, and then being able to communicate with people that are on the team currently, I think is huge. Like, even if you've just slide into some DMs on LinkedIn, just being able to get their perspective on what they've experienced in the role. And I think just getting that insight is so helpful, for sure.
Yeah, and those questions around how do they view development and growth, and do they invest in it? What does that look like? You mentioned, how people are measured. What does that look like as well? I think understanding those components can give you some better insight into, what is your potential to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we moved into this job, you mentioned that they were really great about how can we build your brand outside of the business or within the business? And earlier you had actually mentioned that when you were moving towards goals, you were always thinking about like, what's next, what's next, what's next. Did that mentality follow you into this role, or did they allow you to kind of like center on how you wanted to develop as a professional going forward?
So I think it was, there was a good and bad part to it. There was a lot more where I was doing bigger dreaming, setting all types of different goals, thinking about the potential, diving more into what skills I wanted to develop and how did I want to grow as a leader. But I almost took all that and then, took that hard work mindset and was on like hyper drive of like, oh my gosh, there's all these things now that I'm thinking about and excited about and I want to go do this and I want to improve here. And I think self-assessment is something that I definitely learned to do well in my hockey years, to be able to kind of pick out like, okay, where do I need improvement? And so they had to coach me a lot on like, this is all great, but you can't go out and work on 10 things all at once. It's gonna be too much or overwhelming, and it's gonna be hard to focus. And that brought me back to, okay, again, as an athlete, would I be thinking about how do I improve my skating and my shot and this all at once? I'd probably focus on a few skills and build on them. So yeah, it was good and bad in that, I had all these different dreams and ambitions and things, but now they wanted to try to help me figure out, okay, how do you go after all of those things, but not think I need to complete them all, within the next 6 months. Yeah, so that was part of it.
Yeah, right now I can totally understand the impatience of like wanting all your dreams and goals to come true right now. I'm terrible at that. Like
Yeah.
you just have to remind yourself all the time that it's like little strikes every single day that equals success. But it is really hard when you're in it. Like you want it now. You just want it now. And you want to like use your own will to get it done when sometimes that's not the way it goes.
Yeah. One of my leaders introduced me to, it's a framework. It's called JDI, Judgment, Drive, and Influence. And it was really helpful to think about because she explained how organizations will use this for people who, they identify as good potential for leadership. And they look at to see what's your balance across judgment, drive, and influence. And they would say, they're like, you are huge on drive, but because you're so high on drive, it's impacting your judgment and your influence. So, for example, I might send messages to teammates or emails that are very driven of, okay, where are we at? Are we getting these things done? Are we going through, and then, but maybe not put as much empathy into that. Not that it wasn't ill-intended, but just was so driven that it was like, okay, am I thinking through how I'm communicating this, how it's going to come across to someone? Is it going to, get them excited and motivated, or be more like, oh my God, she's coming at me again with, all of these things. Or that if being so driven to get through all the priorities and the to-do list, but not thinking about, oh, but that item there, that is, if I'm using my judgment, could be something really strategic if I slow down a bit and sit and think about it. So having that framework shared with me really kind of helped me realize like, all right, that hard work, that drive is good, but you've got to balance it out if you want to, I think, grow to another level.
Yeah, I've never heard that JDI before, but I wrote it down and I'm going to think about that. It's like a balance. That drive is great, but maybe missing some other areas of importance if that's like where your main focus goes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So did that drive ever start to, and I know we've talked about this in previous conversations. So you've mentioned burnout in your career. Was that drive really what started to fuel that burnout, or when did that start to show up for you?
Yeah, I think it was definitely the drive and, like I said, the good combination of now thinking about all these things I could do and want to do. I think I would sometimes also use the excuse that, oh, I finally found like this work I'm really passionate about. I love the work so much. Like that's why I want to work so many hours or work late at night. And I've seen, articles or things about kind of where you kind of use that as an excuse to become like work obsessed. So I think that was another component of it. And I think also in that contractor at first, the contractor kind of consulting piece, it's like, well, if I work more hours, then that you can make more money. So I'm gonna work more hours. So there was all of those components, and I think I was pushing myself to do so much versus and I was reading about this recently. There was in the Harvard Business Review, there was an article about like the cognitive parts of your brain and the different parts of your brain, and how it's actually more exhausting if you're only using one part. So if you're in like execution mode, like you're going to exhaust yourself, and versus you could do the same amount of time worked, but if you're taking some time to do more thinking or strategic or creative work, that won't actually then cause you to have as much exhaustion. So reflecting on that now, I realize like, oh, I was in such execution mode all the time. And I think that bled into personal life, where then it was like trying to slow down or shut my brain down, when trying to go to bed at night. It like that started to impact other areas. Like, oh, okay, it was hard to sleep because then in this, do and accomplish and be productive and get things done type mode, that it was hard, or you felt almost, guilty sometimes for relaxing or slowing down.
Yeah. Katie, I can totally relate to that. I have sometimes the hardest time falling asleep at night because I'm still like in that mode of like, oh, all the things that I need to get done or I didn't get done earlier today. And it can be totally exhausting. And I want to hear more for my own selfish benefit too on the work that you do with Virtue Consulting and how you are coaching leaders to bring that athlete mindset into their teams and their cultures. But you have such a well-rounded look at what's important to athletes now. Like it was like drive, of course, is super important, but like you were just saying, like the recovery is important too. You can't just be in drive mode all the time. So how are you coaching these leaders to bring that well-rounded athlete mentality into their cultures?
Yeah, so I use the term sustainable performance. And what I've realized is I needed to shift from this be productive and that's what's valuable to actually, how can I get back to being, a high performer, but something that's sustainable and that's not going to lead to this burnout that I was dealing with. So I use a playbook that has 3 different steps to it. There's purpose, values, and behaviors. And, I touched on it a little bit, like really diving in and discovering that purpose and being able to answer, why am I doing what I do? Having that vision for yourself that guides you. And the same with values, being able to define what your own values are, because those help you to say, right, this is where I'm going to prioritize, or these are going to be the boundaries that I want to set when these are things that I value. So for me, for example, connection is important. And I put my kind of family value under connection. And I say, I want to make sure I make time to connect with my kids, with my husband. So how do I do that? How do I make that a boundary within, my work and my personal life? And how do I make sure when I'm connecting with them, I'm not sitting next to them, but still looking at my phone, checking emails, but actually having that conversation with them. So that's just an example of, how you can use values to then be specific to you, your life, and your actual behaviors. And those behaviors, that's the third step is, you can think about and have defined your purpose and your values, but if you're not actually executing, putting it into your day to day, then, I say that becomes BS, and we need to make sure it's not BS, it becomes behaviors. And what I've realized in thinking about all of those components, from being an athlete and what I needed in the workplace and what was missing, was actually the metric should be energy. Like, how do I have that sustained energy throughout the day, and for that longer time period of working, and what is it that contributes to that? How can I figure out what's draining? So I use what I call an energy eval, and I think about physical, mental, and emotional components. And like I've said, I mean, I realized actually all of those components were part of being an athlete. Physical, like your movement, your fuel, your sleep, those were all part of it. The hard work, but also having the rest. So I talk about, your pace and your space, and grace as well. And you needed that because you weren't going to win every single game. You had to give yourself that grace. So I realized that all of those were components I utilized, and now I can actually take that and utilize those in my life and in work today. And that, thinking about those 9 components, helps me to sometimes spot, like, okay, this is going well, I'm doing really good, I'm getting my workouts in, and I'm on top of my sleep. But if I look at my calendar, like, there's way too much stuff on it, and that's going to exhaust me. And they impact, all those components end up impacting each other. So I use that framework and kind of that athlete mentality behind it in sports performance, but now bring it into a discussion of what that looks like in the workplace, what people are dealing with, and how can you break those down into behaviors, into small steps. Like, to get better sleep, like, what are you doing the 30 minutes right before you go to sleep? How can that change or adjust? And I try to bring in, I shared before how I was focused on maybe too many things, and that led to burnout. And so now I try to talk about, right, if you pick one thing, and I went through this where I was like, if I just try to improve in one area, slow my pace, actually then doing that over time, it compounded. And then I was sleeping better because during the day I was breathing better and slowing down, and how they're all interlinked. But I was having a conversation with a previous athlete recently, and it was interesting because they pointed out all these things, these components I'm talking about, a lot of them, when you're an athlete, especially, in college, at university, they're kind of all handled or planned out a lot for you. You have that nutritionist, or you have someone scheduling your time to do these things. And the difference now is, like, you've got to do it for yourself. You have to be able to make that happen because no one's there, behind your shoulder saying, like, this is your menu, pre-game meal, or this is when we're all getting together to work out, or, this is your rest day. So I thought it was interesting they pointed that out, that difference now in real life.
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually just talked to someone about this last week, I think it was. They were saying the same thing. Like, athletes are so driven, and we have the practice part dialed in. You go to training table, you go to the training room for rehab. But when you're on your own, it truly is, the responsibility is all on you. And that is a huge adjustment for a lot of people. Like, having to actually make time for those things outside of your sport. And it's, a lot of those things tend to fall off the radar for people.
Yeah. Especially when, there's so many competing things that come into life, or if you have kids, you're not only taking care of yourself, you're taking care of them, and
Yeah, and I'm under the firm belief that, there are certain, obviously, it's easy for me to say I don't have kids, so I'll out myself on that. But I do have friends with children, and I think it's important for them to fill their cup so that they can be present and be available for the other people, because, if they're just give to everyone else, mom's not happy,
Yeah.
nobody else is going to be happy. So I can see that, like how difficult that would be to prioritize yourself and the holistic side of like taking care of yourself, not just getting in the gym, but also the nutrition, the sleep, the wind down, the things that fill your cup. But um I digress. I just want to know too, when you're mapping out these things with your clients or with leaders, what really surprises them the most about, where their energy is maybe draining them, or is there like a common thing where you see with a lot of people?
Yeah, so I think, and you brought it up, sleep's a big one that people bring up. And I think that comes up a lot because, yeah, if you don't get good sleep, then your energy during the day can be low and it can be hard to um, concentrate, or, you're loaded on caffeine constantly. And so I think that one comes up um, because of the impact it can have. And then this kind of vicious cycle of, okay, well, how do I try to then start good habits during the day if I'm, struggling with sleep. And I certainly talk to a lot of people who travel for work, and so that's something that can get disrupted when you're traveling as well. I'd say the other two are when I talk about your pace and then your space in the day. So pace being, are you at this constant, I call it, kind of this feeling of 100%, where it's like I'm going from a meeting and then what's on my to-do list, or what's in my inbox for my emails to answer? Oh, do I have messages I need to check? And you're in that sometimes almost kind of this frantic from thing to thing, and you don't have time to take a breath or to step back for a minute. And so pace comes up, and I think it can be a combination where sometimes it might be the organization that, it's that type of pace or culture. But sometimes I think we've gotten into just this, we wear busy as this badge of honor, that, oh, people ask you, how are you? Oh, I'm so busy. Um, and so I think part of it is on ourselves, where we might not ask someone when they send things over, or they ask, through an email or a message. We might not go back to say, well, is there do you need this immediately? What's the deadline for this? And a lot of times then people come at, oh, like next week is fine, but we think everything is urgent, and so we're trying to stay on top of all of that. So I see that contribute to the pace piece. And then that's also what can get in the way of space. So space meaning, like, do you have some time where you're not doing all of those things, where you can say, okay, I'm going to be able to do some deep thinking. I'm really focused on this project, and I want to think about, like, what are the right questions to ask, or pulling all the pieces together, or if you're doing some type of creative project. And that's the piece where people say, like, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. And I think that is definitely a differentiator between going from, when people say, I want to be a leader, I want to be more strategic, like getting that space in your calendar, in your diary, that helps to then have you show up more strategically. So I think people are always interested in that, and kind of how do I make it happen? How do I, make my leaders see that actually I need that to help me be better and grow more. And so I think those are some of the ones that come up most. But then I think what people also realize sometimes is the interconnectedness between, I mentioned it briefly, like, if you're running at that fast pace, then that might cause you to not find time for any movement or to drink enough water, which then contributes to the impact on sleep or somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, I think busyness is a badge of honor is definitely something that's cultural for us in America. So I see
Yeah.
that all the time. And I was thinking about, oh, how often do I answer that question with, yeah, I'm busy. It's probably too much. So I would just want to know, you talked about boundaries earlier too. If you had to give someone permission to stop doing something right now or to set a boundary, what would you tell them?
Um, so I would say, this idea that I have to do more in order to get ahead or achieve my goals, that I have to work more hours, I have to say yes. I think that's what I would say. Like, can we can we stop putting that pressure on ourselves to think, I actually, I need to always do more. I found when actually I shortened my priority list and shortened my view of and looked at it in terms of what's going to actually make the most impact, what parts am I going to enjoy the most, then more actually got accomplished, or I felt like, more value was delivered versus thinking like, oh, well, I got, through all of these 10 things, but only at this level, right? So I think that's what I would tell people is it's not necessarily about the amount. It's not about, the piece about being how productive can I be, thinking about, that sustainable performance.
Yeah. That just kind of reminded me of it's like a visual that I have, like of someone digging holes in a yard. I always think about this when I'm spinning my tires and doing too many things at once. It's like if I dig 4 holes in the yard and I only have an hour, like you're not going to get very far in all of them. But
Yeah.
if you focus and maybe
One.
put those other things aside for a minute, doesn't have to be forever, but like how much more progress could you make on that one thing in an hour rather than being like, oh my God, I have all this stuff to do. So
Yes.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
So, Katie, we only have a little bit of time left. So
Mhm.
I see some medals behind you. I do want to talk a little bit about your running journey because I think it's really badass. So after hockey, you shifted into running and you set a goal to run on every continent. I just think that's so cool. I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I'm sure, lots of athletes go through this where you're ending your sport and not as much time for it. And so I got into running because it was something that was, challenging me physically still. It was something that I could set new goals within. It also it was something that hockey did this as well, and it's one of those things that like would clear my head. When I'm out on the ice in a game, like I'm not thinking about my to-do list. I'm just playing the game. And running does the same, but I also find when I'm out running, like that's actually when I get a lot of ideas because I'm just and it's like where people, they get ideas in the shower, they get ideas at
Yeah.
these random times where they're not like putting this pressure on their brain to think about things. They're giving it a space. So running does that for me, and so I just enjoy being able to do that. But when I was being pushed to set, some different goals and think bigger and what could you dream up? Well, I love to travel and I was like, love running. So I'm going to set this goal to run a race on every continent. And so I've got 6 done and then I have Australia that's left.
Do you have any plans to do Australia soon?
As of right now, it's planned for December of this year. So
That's
just
awesome.
working out the logistics, but yeah.
What part of Australia?
Either Sydney or Melbourne.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so that means you've done Antarctica, which I think is insane.
Yeah, 2 years ago I did Antarctica. There is a company that takes you down there and they do the race. And yeah, that was an awesome experience. To run it, to see it, be with all these other people running it as well. Surprisingly, it was about 30 degrees. So it
Okay.
wasn't like and it's their summer, the Southern Hemisphere summer. So it wasn't as cold as you would think. I mean, it was hilly and icy and
Yeah, so you're like running on ice down there.
yeah, you run between there's different countries that have their, centers of people that are, kind of doing work down there.
Okay.
And so there's kind of like a gravel road between them, but it was snowing and the snow was freezing so during the race, so it froze.
Did you
Yeah.
do a full marathon? Is that what you run?
I did the half this time.
Okay.
So I've done a combination of fulls and halves, and I thought, this first time down there, I'll do a half. So I do have a goal to go back and do a full, but I'm not, putting a time frame on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. I mean, I'm not a huge runner, so I respect and admire that dedication, especially in Antarctica when it's freezing. That's crazy. I'd love to go to see the penguins, but
And
I don't,
then we did the polar plunge. So we jumped off the boat into the water. and came back.
were you afraid of, what are the seals there? The
Oh,
mean,
yeah. I wasn't necessarily afraid. Like I knew they had checked, that we were in an okay spot right there. It was more like they're like, oh wait, don't jump yet because there's like chunks of ice coming.
floating underneath you. Oh my God. The tiger seals. Is that what they're called? Is that what I'm,
It might be. I know we saw the seals. I know we saw, some of the things that they were attacking
oh my
from the
God.
boat we were watching it. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, that's scary. But anyway, I'm getting way off topic here. So, Katie, I really appreciate your time today with us. This has been an awesome conversation. I have one final question for you. Just
Yeah.
would love to know, for the namesake of the show, what does changing the game mean to you?
So for me and kind of my own personal mission now, like I really want to change the way we think about work and, all those components that I think should be part of what we view work. It's not like, hey, let me work hard enough to earn rest. Let me work hard enough to, be able to earn or give myself this grace. Like changing the way we view it, and not that busy, badge of honor, but the idea of athletes perform at this high level because they do all of these different things that are important, an important part of that performance. And so I want to, be able to bring that to changing the way we view work.
I love it. Katie, thank you so much for your time today. Where can our listeners connect with you or find you?
Definitely on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn page. I would love to connect there, or my website, which is katievirtue.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back with another episode next time. And Katie, we'll see you soon. Appreciate it.
Jordan.